This is Jeff Badger, the Grinding Doc, and this is going to be a very short video on loading with aluminum oxide wheels when you're grinding steels, stainless steels, especially Inconels, nickel alloys, because they're more susceptible to loading. Okay, now, one of the ways to cause your loading to happen more quickly, to get bad loading, is to dress your wheel dull. So these electron microscope photos were done when they were doing rotary plunge dressing, but the concept applies to all dressing. I've seen it for all dressing, but this is for rotary plunge, and these were some Italian students that I supervised at Chalmers University, and they did some fabulous tests very quickly, got some very good results looking at rotary plunge dressing, and we eventually wrote a cert paper about it, published it I think a year ago at the Dublin or Bilbao CERP conference. And these are some of the SEM photos, along with Philip, a German guy in Chalmers. He also supervised the project. So what we have is a diamond wheel. We have a aluminum oxide wheel dressed with a diamond roll. And what we see here is a flat, dull grit. So that's a flat, dull grit created not from grinding, but from dressing. In fact, most dull grinding wheels in the world are not dull because of grinding, they're dull because of dressing. They dress the wheel dull. Then when we turn on the backscatter effect on the electron microscope, what we see is steel stuck to the grit. So we have little chips that are stuck, and then those chips compacted, and then those chips started chemically reacting with the aluminum oxide or the iron oxide layer. Reacting with the iron oxide, the aluminum oxide. And what we have is a layer of smeared material, smeared steel, smeared workpiece material on the top of the aluminum oxide grit. We don't want to grind with this. This is going to be pain and suffering. And it's pain and suffering because we have a loaded wheel. Now, why do we have a loaded wheel? We have a loaded wheel because loaded wheels load. That's what they do. But this wheel loaded very quickly because we dressed them dull. And when you dress them dull, you generate a lot of heat, which causes things to stick. When you dress them dull, you get that flat area with the chips compacting and causing that loading. Here's another one, before backscatter and without backscatter and with backscatter. Now what we see is a dull grit. Look at that nasty dull grit. And then we turn on the backscatter. What we see is steel adhering to the grit. I think that's the same photo actually, just zoomed in. Is that right? Yes, it is. All right, here's a different one. So here is a picture of an aluminum oxide wheel that's been dressed dull, and what we have is smeared steel. Turn on the backscatter and boom, look at that. Nasty and unpleasant. We don't want to grind with that. That wheel was dressed dull, and when it was dressed dull, it loaded very quickly. Here's a wheel that was not dressed dull. This is a wheel that was dressed relatively sharp, and what happened? We didn't get any loading. Or let's say we got loading very, very slowly because we dressed the wheel sharp. So companies that have big loading problems, unless their loading is because they're grinding nickel alloys, which are just nasty to grind and load quickly, or stainless steels. But if they're getting extreme loading, there's a very good chance that extreme loading is caused because they're making the wheel dull. Make the wheel sharp, and if you can't get the surface finish you want, use a smaller grit size, but still make it sharp. The biggest cause of all the problems in the grinding world are people who use a too big a grit size and then they dress the wheel dull. Causes all types of problems. One of those problems is loading of the wheel. Jeff Badger, the Grinding Doc, talking about grinding. This is the stuff I teach in my courses, my 3-day high-intensity grinding course. And this is stuff that's given in the Book of Grinding.